I'm joined now by the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, Brian, great to be with you.
So you had just met this past weekend with a group of Texas legislators, and obviously Texas is in the news right now because Greg Abbott, listening to the orders of Donald Trump, is seeking to further gerrymander that state's maps. And so there are a few weapons that Democrats have at our disposal where we can finally fight fire with fire. And we have, and I say this because for so long we have watched as Republicans have gerrymandered maps in North Carolina, in Utah, in Ohio, in Florida. Now they're looking at Texas. So all across the country, they have been able to wield this weapon against Democrats, and it's largely been met with a refusal to actually act. Well, now it's happening in such an egregious way that it may actually be the reason that even in what we expect 2026 to be, which is a wave year, Republicans might be able to actually retain power of the House or retain their majority in the House by virtue of these gerrymanders. And so from your vantage, in terms of what you're able to do in Illinois, are you willing to fight fire with fire here and respond in a commensurate way if indeed we see Greg Abbott engage in a partisan gerrymander in Texas?
Well, I appreciate the question. I'll begin my answer by saying I've been on team fight since I first got elected in 2018. I really believe, we have to make choices right now about whether you're going to be on team fight or team cave. And the Republicans are using frankly, everything, whether it's cheating, breaking the law, trying to do things that I think are non-traditional. And we Democrats can't live by the old rules. We've got to live by the rules, but we've also got to react and fight. And so when I think about what they're trying to do in Texas, and by the way, they're also trying to do it next door to me here in Missouri, next door to Illinois, and other places. I think, historically that's, midstream redistricting was not something that we Democrats would do. But if they force us, we've got to put everything on the table. We've got to make decisions that maybe we wouldn't have made before. And so that's why I'm on the team here. I think that governors across the country that have the ability, maybe it's the ones where we've got trifectas, we've got to do everything we can to stand up to what Donald Trump and Greg Abbott are trying to do. I'm not going to countenance anymore the idea that we're going to sit around and watch them do it and complain from the sidelines when we have the ability to stop them.
And so, we're kind of in the world of hypotheticals, but the reality is that the special legislative session was already called in Texas. They are meeting right now in Texas. There's no indication, at least as of right now, that they're stepping back. And so if Greg Abbott continues on exactly the path that we're in right now, would it be fair to say, to the extent that you can say definitively, that you would be willing to fight fire with fire and look toward calling, I don't know what the process would be in Illinois, but calling a legislative session to do exactly what they're doing in Texas and what Gavin Newsom has said that he'd be willing to do in California?
Yeah, like I said, everything's on the table. It's why I've spoken up about it. It's why I met with the Texas legislators. They walked in the door, and I know that they were here in Chicago to convince me. But before they opened their mouths, I said, "You had me at hello." And so I've been at this fight for a very long time. Again, when I got elected in 2018, but also just days after Donald Trump got reelected in last November. I said, if you come for my people, you come through me. And I was saying that to Donald Trump. And I have fought every step of the way and almost been disappointed at how long it's taken many other Democrats who understand what's at stake here, but to get on to team fight.
And can you dig into that a little bit, just this sense of fight? Because, look, as long as I've been covering Democratic politics, there has been a sense of our goal on the left has always been to preserve the institutions. And look, I get it. I'm guilty of it too. In the lead up to the 2024 election, I thought, perhaps naively now in retrospect, that just appealing to folks' sense of the preservation of democracy was going to be enough to bring people to the table. Clearly it wasn't. And so that's why we're in the position that we're in right now. But just this sense of where Democrats have been in the past and what you would like to see for Democrats moving forward as, we kind of look, the party has to look differently in 2026 than it did in 2024. by virtue of the fact that we lost the White House, the House, and the Senate, and by extension the Supreme Court. So we don't control any branch of government here, and so we can either move forward and continue to make the same mistakes that we've made in the past, or we can have a new North Star in the party. And so how does that kind of inform your worldview of the party moving forward?
Well, you're right. Because we don't have control of the Congress, because we don't have control of the presidency, and because we've got a cult of personality that's guiding the entire country right now, because the Congress won't do anything to stop Donald Trump. The locus of power really has moved to the states. And that's why I know you've interviewed other governors. I really think governors are the front line of defense right
Yeah.
now. But until we can take back the Congress, and I am confident that if we just play fair, if we just have a free and fair election in 2026, and these days that seems like asking for a lot from the Republicans, but
Yeah.
but a free and fair election in 2026, I believe we will win the Congress and be able to slow down or stop Donald Trump. But they're trying to cheat now. And so,
Right.
look, when I think about the obligations that we have, we're going to have to think out of the box as a party. And I've been doing that too. And I admitted several months ago when I spoke in New Hampshire that, never before in my life have I called for mass protest, for people to get out in the street and make their voices heard.
Yeah.
But I do now because I really believe that if we don't do it now, we may never be able to do it again. I built a Holocaust museum. I was involved in that for many years. I am Jewish. I understand what happened in Nazi Germany, and the analogy that I draw is simply that the rights of people in Germany were taken away in a very short period of time. The constitutional republic that was the German Republic was diminished and disappeared in 53 days. So think about what's happened in this country. Nobody could believe, and I said this before many years ago, that nobody could believe me when I said, this could happen in the United States. And
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the Holocaust. I'm really talking about specifically the power that a dictator took, and then the whims of the dictator, are whatever those are. But we have to be on guard right now as Democrats, not out there. The message about fighting for democracy, it's important. It certainly gets our base moving. But that's not what, you knock on 100 doors, and I've knocked on a lot of doors in my life, and you start to talk to people about democracy going away,
Right.
people kind of roll their eyes.
Yeah.
But you talked about the effects of it, which are, the question of affordability. I mean, do you think tariffs are working? And yet it's one man who's imposing a fundamental change in our economy that's costing you, the taxpayers, to pay more for your goods. That's just one example, but I can go down the line of the things that are being taken away, the rights of people. I think most people are pro-civil rights, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, they believe in civil rights. He's taking those away. And so is the Congress. So I think we, as a party, we need to be out there, messaging about affordability, messaging about civil rights, messaging about, do you think that Medicare, Social Security, and Medicaid should be taken away? Because that is what they're aiming to do. And even Republicans who used to be believers in those are just going along because they're afraid of Donald Trump.
Right. To that point of the impacts that yes, Donald Trump as an authoritarian could have, but the actual impacts on regular people, you brought up the tariffs. You've signed an executive order in your state to push back against exactly that. Can you give some insight into what that would do and its effectiveness?
Yeah, what we're trying to do is first to make clear what the costs really are, because I don't think most people understand what the tariffs are doing. They see it just, in general as inflation and something natural. It's not. When you break out what's happening to the economy as a result of tariffs, we're talking about serious imposition of cost increases for people. You just heard today that he's imposing a 15% tariff on everything from Europe.
Yeah.
The number of things that you buy, they're our largest trading partner, Europe. And the number of things that you and I and everybody else buys that are from Europe, from Canada and Mexico too, our best neighbors, our closest neighbors, our friends, and the imposition of tariffs on them. But these tariffs are really bringing down our economy slowly but surely. There's uncertainty associated with them, and then the tax. It doesn't get paid by foreigners. It doesn't get paid by other countries. It gets paid by American consumers. And so I just think we've got to make sure, and that's what we're doing here in Illinois. We're making sure people understand the cost of government is going up because of tariffs. And so our aim here is to first highlight it and then address it as best we can. I've tried very hard to work with the Canadians and the Mexicans. They're our two largest trading partners here in Illinois. And what I've tried to do with them is to remind them that any retaliatory tariffs, they need to take into account that we're not imposing these tariffs in Illinois. Indeed,
Yeah.
we don't want the tariffs, and they should be aiming those retaliatory tariffs elsewhere on the states where the congressmen and senators are going along with President Trump.
And have they been receptive to that idea? We saw a little bit of that when the trade war first broke out between the U.S. and Canada, and we had heard, I can't remember if it was Carney or Trudeau or another member of Parliament or whoever it may be, did come out and say that we're going to focus our attention on the states and the governors who are actually empowering Donald Trump to do what he's doing right now. And so, have they been receptive to that idea?
They indeed have. And I've had private conversations. I won't talk about the details of them or with whom, but I suffice to say that I've reached out to government officials, to diplomats representing Canada. And indeed, that is what they have said, that they're going to try to do their best to focus this. They understand politics, democratic, little d democratic politics, just as well as anybody here in the United States. So I believe that they will do as you just described.
Do you think that other Democratic governors in this country should follow your lead and talk to international trading partners and say, hey, recognize that we are on the same side as you all. We also don't want these tariffs. We also understand the negative impacts that it's going to have on the economy and on trade. And so if you want to retaliate against what the United States is doing on behalf of Donald Trump, target your ire to the people who are actually emboldening and supporting him.
Yeah, and remember, yes, I think other governors should be doing that. Remember that what we're talking about is this isn't about punishing some, not others. It is about, affecting policy. That's what matters to the Canadians. It's what matters to the Europeans, right? It's about changing attitudes in those states that have representation that is standing with Donald Trump and against the American consumer.
Right.
And so they understand that. And again, most European countries, in fact, all the European countries that are part of the European Union are democracies. And so their voices, and they understand how our democracy works. And so they believe that they can help to shape American opinion.
So I want to switch gears a little bit here to a different topic, certainly one that's kind of taken hold of our body politic for the last 3.5 weeks, and that is the issue of Epstein. Can I have your reaction to the fact that, the most recent comment by Donald Trump was that he finally came out and said that he didn't have the privilege of going to Epstein's Island, which was an interesting choice of words, but just a general response to the fact that, this was plaguing him for several weeks, finally had the opportunity to run overseas. Do you think that his international trip was a way to offer up something of a distraction so that for the 4th week in a row, he wouldn't have to talk about the issue that's been dogging him that he doesn't want to talk about?
We don't know whether he's been to Epstein Island or not, just because he says that he, didn't have the privilege. We don't really know. What we know is that Donald Trump promised his supporters that he would release this information and then went through the charade in the first several months in office as if, oh, yeah, we're going to go do that. And then I'm not sure what happened, right? Somebody must have told him something about information that would be released that made him change his mind. And so I think it's very suspicious that he didn't just say it during the campaign. He kept saying it while he was in office in the first several months. And then all of a sudden, he's not going to do what he said he was going to do. Now I really want to know. Before I was, really, before I was like, I'm not sure what to think about all of it. Now I think I agree with a whole bunch of his supporters that why don't you just tell us what you know and what the Justice Department has. He's tried to point at the courts, of course, and blame judges for not releasing it. I mean, they have legal obligations to do the right thing, but
Right.
the real question I guess I have to ask is, what is he hiding?
Do you have any concern that, look, if Trump wanted transparency on this issue, he would release the files. They're in his possession. They're in the DOJ's possession. Pam Bondi is an appendage of Donald Trump. If he says to release them, she'll release them. He, of course, to your exact point, goes off to try and release some grand jury testimonies that he knew full well the judges don't have the authority to release. And so he's trying to point our attention in different directions. But if he really wanted transparency, he would just release the files. With that said, he then sends Todd Blanche, his second in command at the DOJ, to sprint down to the courthouse in Florida to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell, who is the only living person who might have information that could or could not incriminate Donald Trump himself. And so do you have some concern that the fact that, under the guise of transparency, which again is complete bullshit, because if they wanted transparency, they would just release the files that they have. But under the guise of transparency, that they might offer something of a pardon or reduced sentence for Ghislaine Maxwell in return for her saying something that would absolve Donald Trump in the public sphere?
I think we should all be deeply concerned about that because we've seen Donald Trump offer deals to people to benefit himself personally.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, why would you think this is any different? And then add to that Kash Patel, who has got to be one of the biggest conspiracy theorists, out there, one of the leading advocates for, release the files for I don't know how long before Donald Trump got elected. Now he's the FBI director and said that the FBI has these files and they're in the control of the director of the FBI and that they should be released. He's now the director of the FBI. Why is he not? And not only that, but he's come out and said, oh, there's nothing there. There are no files. And Bondi, who said they're sitting on my desk. Oh, now there are no files.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't match up with reality. I think we've got to not only ask questions, but demand answers.
All right. Well, we will leave it there. Governor Pritzker, I appreciate your time and thank you for fighting as hard as you are.
Great to talk to you, Brian.